Hello everyone. In this video we're going to start working on the second practical assignment of the course. So practical assignment 2 is going to deal with rendering floor plans and elevations inside of Photoshop. So this practical assignment is actually a continuation of practical assignment 1, where we drew the floor plan and elevation of that restroom slash laundry space. And now we're going to look at how we can take that just the line drawings that we did in AutoCAD and bring them over into Photoshop and actually start adding color and texture and shadow and highlights in order to render them and make them look a lot more realistic and easy to understand from a client's perspective. All right, so what you're looking at right now is actually the example from last year. So last year's first project was actually the entire floor of a house. Actually, this is my house that you're seeing here. We just did the first floor plan of my house, and we drew it out, and then we did the rendering of it and everything. But this year, in order to get more content in, I kind of pulled this back a little bit and stripped it down essentially. So instead of doing the entire floor of the house like we did last year, we're just going to focus on the laundry and bathroom area. And then here you can see this is the laundry and bathroom elevation that we did earlier in the practical assignment 1. Okay, so essentially we're going to be making this bigger, getting rid of the rest of the floor plan and just putting this on, and then having our elevation here. But this is the final presentation board that was done in InDesign. So this week we're going to focus on how we actually go about rendering the floor plan and the elevation. And then next week we're going to look at how we bring those over into InDesign and actually put together a presentation board layout. All right, so to start off here, there are a series of files that are on Blackboard. So if I show you those really quick, on Blackboard you're going to see the practical assignment to plan file, and you're going to see the elevation file. I'm just going to give those to you so that we're all working off the same thing, so you don't have to worry about setting up these files yourself. We're all just going to work off of these ones that I provide you. And then there's also going to be a couple of textures, which they're not in this folder right now, but there will be a texture for the flooring material. So this gray tile texture is going to be in there. And then this marble texture that I am showing on the countertop within the bathroom, that's also going to be there on Blackboard. So go ahead and just download those 4 files, save them to a folder, and then I'm going to go over now and show you how we open those in Photoshop. All right, so when we get to Photoshop, what you want to do is just go ahead and go to your open button, and then go ahead and navigate to wherever you save those files. And I'm just going to open up the plan one first, and then we'll do the elevation one later. So click on the plan, click open. Here in this folder, or I'm sorry, in this window, let's leave everything pretty much set at the default. Yeah, crop to bounding box, that looks good. Everything else, make sure that the resolution is set to 300, and everything else should be fine. So then I will just click on OK, and that will open this up here like that. All right, that looks good. Next, I'm going to go ahead and just do my elevation to make sure that I have that opened up right. So I'm going to go up here to File and then go to Open. Then I will go to my elevation, click open. Same thing here, make sure we're set to 300. Make sure the crop to is set to bounding box, and then click OK. And it's hard to see, but if you zoom in, you can see that the lines are all there. So this is fine. And then for the time being, just leave it as is, but I'm going to go back to the floor plan for right now. All right, so what we want to do is start bringing in our textures that we will be adding in to our drawing. All right. So again, I'm going to go up to File and then Open, And then if I go to my textures folder, I have my two textures here. So what I'm going to do is just highlight over both of these to open them at the same time and then click on open. And that should open up two more of these tabs up here. Okay, what I'm going to do now is actually define these as patterns. All right, so what I want to do first is go down here to my layer stack, and then I want to unlock them. And then I'm going to click the control key and then click on the thumbnail in order to select that. And then from there, I will go to edit and then define pattern. And then this one, I'm just going to name it marble and then click OK. And then I'm going to go over to my other tab where I have my flooring tile, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I will unlock that, click control, click on my little thumbnail, then I'll go to edit and define pattern, and then I will just call this 12 by 24 tile. And that should be good. Okay, so after I've done that, I'm going to go back to my floor plan. And now what I want to do is start creating masks, okay? Just like we did with our previous labs, we're going to start masking out regions for where our textures are going to go so that it's just an easier process down the road. So that's always how I like to work. I like to mask out my regions, and then once my regions are masked, I basically just bring the textures in and I put them where they need to go. Okay, so this is how I like to organize my files, and it's definitely a lot more important when you have bigger spaces that you're working with. So for example, if I were working with the entire floor plan of the house, this structure would make a little bit more sense, but you should get into the habit of this regardless. So as we go through, it might seem kind of simple because there's not really a lot going on in our layer stack, but like I said, a lot of the times you'll be working with a lot bigger spaces, and if you're organizing things properly, it just makes your life a lot easier. All right, so what I like to do is start out by creating folders for everything. So my first one, I'm going to go here to my folder icon, click on a new folder, and then I'm going to rename this to be my floor tile. All right. And then within my floor tile, I'm going to create a new layer. So make sure that my floor tile layer is selected, and then click on my new layer button to make sure that there's a new layer contained within my folder. So again, I know it's within the folder because it's indented. And if I were to do this to collapse it, the layer would go away. So this layer here, I'm going to rename to tile. All right, so I have my floor tile and then I have my tile layer. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create a mask for my floor tile. All right, so actually what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do that little trick that we did before, and I'm going to go here to edit, and then I'm going to go to fill, and then I'm going to fill this in with a solid color, so click on color, and then I'm just going to fill that one with red. Okay, so now my entire screen is red, but I'm going to turn down my opacity a little bit so that I can see what's going on behind my red color. All right, so with that done, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to actually click on my layer 1. So this is the actual floor plan itself. I'm going to make sure that that is selected, and then I'm going to go to my magic wand tool here, and I'm going to go up here where it says sample all layers, and I'm going to temporarily turn that off. So usually you want this on, but in this case, since I'm working on this layer directly, I want to turn that off so that like my red color and stuff doesn't interfere. So what this does is it basically just looks at every single layer inside of your layer stack, and it's going to select based on all of them. But if you have this turned off, it's only going to go off of the layer that you're currently on. So you can see here, if I were to go in here and use my magic wand, it is following the lines of my drawing. But if I were to go to like a different layer and use it, it's selecting the whole thing because it's no longer looking at the actual line work, it's ignoring it. So it just goes by layer then. So I want to go here to layer 1, deselect everything, make sure that is turned off for right now, and then I want to go in here and actually define where the floor tile is going to go. So that's going to go right here in this area, but then you'll see that we're also going to need to add it in right here as well, and that is what we're going to do next. So first, before we add that area in, I'm going to click on my floor tile folder. I want to click on the folder itself because I'm actually going to be adding the layer mask to the folders and not the layers. And I'm going to then click on my layer mask icon, and you can see my layer mask is made, and that's looking how I want it, except for this area that is missing here in the doorway. All right, so then I'm going to toggle back to my layer 1, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use the magic wand tool again to click on that. But now you're going to see that we're basically getting all the area inside of the doorway, but then we're getting all this area that's outside it as well. So we're going to have to go in and take away from our selection. So now what I'm going to do is go up here to my rectangular marquee tool, and then I'm going to go in here and hold the Alt key to get my little minus next to my cursor. And then I'm going to go in and start taking away portions of this selection. You can see as I do that, the selection, the marching ants, starts to go away a little bit. So I'm just going to cut a lot of this stuff out until I get close to the door. So we'll get all this out, and now you can see that I'm just left with this area right here in front of the door. All right, so I want my floor tile to align with the front face of this wall. So I'm going to create one more selection, and I'm going to make sure the top edge of my selection falls perfectly in line with the top edge of the original selection here. And I also want to make sure that it's fully encompassing the bottom part of this selection that's falling outside of our boundary of the walls. So I'm going to drag it all the way over here, make sure that it is aligning with the original selection, and then I will release when I'm done. So then you're just left with this selection here, which is exactly what we want. So then at this point, you want to go back to your layer mask on your floor tile folder, click on the layer mask, and then go here to edit and then fill, and then we're going to fill this in with white. Okay, so you can see in my layer mask that little portion of the door is black right now. So we're going to go here to white, click fill, and then you can see now that is turned white. And now anything that is red, we know is what's going to end up showing as the floor tile. Okay, so just to reiterate, layer masks are really important. And I know some of you may not have, if you used Photoshop before, you might not have ever used layer masks or might not have understood the purpose of them, because you could just create selections and then fill in with colors or patterns wherever you need. But the beauty of layer masks is they can be easily modified, so you can easily add to them and take away from them. And it's kind of just the standard workflow that you use in the design industry. A lot of the times when you're working on projects on a team, many team members are going to have to open this file and modify it. And by having layer masks, it just makes everybody's job easier, because usually you'll have files, you could have hundreds of layers in a file. It really just depends on how complex the project is. So if you're using layer masks, it makes it a lot easier for the person who's coming in opening to see what they need to modify. Okay, if it's just a bunch of random layers and there's no organizational structure to them, it makes their job a lot harder. So again, if you haven't used layer masks before, I'd recommend getting into the habit of using them, because they're very important actually when you get out into the actual field. All right, so we have our layer mask now established for our floor tile. That looks good. Next, since that's good, we're going to move on and we're going to do our countertop. All right, so I'm going to create a new folder, and this folder is going to be my counter. All right, and then again within here I'm going to create a new layer, and this one is going to be I'll just call this one marble, because I know that my material is going to be marble that I'm applying, so I will call that marble. And then once we have done that, we can go ahead and do the same thing where we're going to go back to layer 1. We're going to use our magic wand and we're going to start creating our selections that we want. All right, so for this one, I'm going to click once right here, and that is getting my counter everything that I want, except it's not getting the washer and dryer. The washer and dryer are actually going to be included in this too, because they're technically underneath the counter. We'll still be able to see their lines through the counter just to, you know, inform the person who's looking at the floor plan, hey, underneath the counter there's a washer and dryer. So all of, you know, the text and the lines will still be visible, but it needs to be added to the selection. So again, going in with the rectangular marquee, clicking the shift key to add to the selection, and then I'm going to start up here in this sort of upper corner, and I want to make sure the selection is fully encompassing the washer and the dryer, and the bottom of it is aligning with the original selection right there. So then I'll just release when it's done, and that's what we are looking for. So now I can go back to my counter folder, and I can click on my layer mask button, and that's going to create my layer mask. And then I can go here on my marble folder, and if I want to confirm how my layer mask is looking, I can go to edit, fill, and then let's say if I go to color, let's just fill that in with a slightly different color so we can differentiate the floor from the countertop. So I'll click on this blue, I'll click OK, and then I will turn down my opacity a little bit so I can see through it. So there we go, that is looking pretty good. All right, next let's do the sink. So again, going to create a new folder. This one is going to be my sink. All right, and then I'm going to create a new layer within the sink folder. I will just call this one sink finish. All right, and then I'm going to go in here and use my magic wand to get this portion of the sink. Whoops, I got to go back to layer 1. Okay, when we're on layer 1, go here, click on this portion of the sink, and then go back to my rectangular marquee tool, click the shift key, hold it somewhere near this top corner of the sink, and then drag, and we want to make sure that we are totally encompassing all the other line work that's inside of the sink, and then we'll release when we're done, and now we get the entire sink itself. Okay, so now I will go to my sink finish layer, I will go to edit, and then fill, and then we're actually going to be filling this one with gray. So right now, instead of choosing a random color, I'm going to go here to 50% gray, and then I'm going to click on OK. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to, we want to put in our layer mask first. So click on the folder, click on the layer mask. There we go. Now go to sink finish. All right, and then we want to go and I'm going to go to fill, edit, fill, and then 50% gray, and then click OK. All right, so that's what we're looking for. And then I'm just going to turn down the opacity slightly so I can see through that. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, at this point, what I'm going to do is actually put in a background so that we're not seeing this checkered pattern, because that can kind of interfere with it. Basically, the checkered pattern that you see appears when there's just no background visible. So something good to do when you see that is go to your very bottom layer, click on a new layer, and then drag that new layer underneath the very bottom one. So my original layer was layer 1, that's this line work here, and my new layer is layer 2. This one I'm going to change the name of it to white background. Okay, and then I'm going to go to my edit and then fill, and then I'm going to fill that in with white. So now we get white sitting underneath everything, and we can kind of read everything that's going on a lot better. All right, so before and after. All right, so that's a lot easier to work with. Okay, so now that we have our white background layer in, let's go ahead and let's do one more here for the toilet. So I'm going to go here to my folder. I'm going to create a new folder for toilet. Okay, then we're going to go back to layer 1, go to our magic wand, click on the toilet, go back to the toilet folder, create a new layer, and then on the toilet folder itself, click on the layer mask button, and that's going to mask out just the toilet. And then here we know that we're going to fill the toilet in with white, so on our layer 2, we're going to rename layer 2 to toilet fill. Okay, and then we're going to click on edit, fill, and then click on white. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is actually add in a wall fill for my walls and my doors. Okay, so presentation plans, if I were to toggle back to my example really quickly, let's see where I put it. A good thing to do is add in a dark wall fill for like your doors and your walls and stuff, because it just helps all the textures and everything that's going on to pop a lot better. So I like to go in and add in just a really dark color to fill this in, but not totally black. So that way you can see that there's a little bit of differentiation between the line work and the actual fill itself. I just think it makes it look a little bit better. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back here to our file, and then we're going to go back to the folder. So I'm going to create a new folder. This one is going to be my wall folder, or walls folder. And then within there, I will create a new layer. This one's going to be my wall fill. Okay, and then we're going to go back to layer 1. We're going to use our magic wand tool, and then we're going to go around making sure we're selecting all the portions of our wall, and then we're going to go to the walls folder, click on the layer mask, and then we will go in here to wall fill, and we will go to edit, fill, and we will fill our wall fill layer in with black. And then we can kind of turn down the opacity of this layer just slightly, maybe something like 75. So that way it's just, you know, not all the way black, but it's mostly black, and we can still see differentiation between our line work and our actual wall fill. We also need to do this for the doors here and here as well. So I'm going to go back to my walls layer mask, and then I'm going to go to my layer 1. Yeah, I have to go to layer 1 first. I'm sorry. Click on layer 1. Click on my actual doors, and then go here to my walls layer mask, edit, fill, and then this is going to be black as well. Or I'm sorry, white, because we're on the layer mask. So we're going to go to white. White is going to reveal what's underneath of it, so we'll click on white, and there we go. The only thing we need to do is actually, let's do one more thing because these colors aren't showing quite right. I'm going to turn this off temporarily, and I'm actually going to go here to my layer 1. So I'm going to remove basically this gray wall fill that's going on so that it's not interfering. So go here to layer 1, and then let's just highlight the 3 regions of the wall on layer 1. Let's go to edit, fill that with white. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Now we'll turn back our walls, and then we're just going to kind of dial the actual wall fill opacity up a little bit since it doesn't have that color underneath of it. All right, something else that we can do, and this is kind of a helpful little trick. If you notice, there's this slight like halo effect that's going on around our borders. Okay, so it's like a little bit lighter right as it butts up against the black here. So something I like to do to fix that is I will click my control key and then I will click on my walls layer mask here to get the selection back. So click on that. Now we can see my selection. And now what I want to do is go up here to edit, or actually select, go here to select, and then go here to modify and then expand. And then when it says, this basically just will bump out your selection by a set number of pixels. So I'm going to click expand by 1. I just want 1 pixel, click OK. When I do that, you can see my expansion grew, or my selection grew a little bit. And now that lighter region is within it. And now on my layer mask, I want to go up here to edit and then fill and then click on white again. And that's going to just add in, it's just going to make my layer mask a little bit bigger so that we're not getting any of that haloing. So now if I deselect, you can see now we don't get any of that where it butts up to the actual lines of the wall. And if you zoom out, it just looks cleaner. All right, so that's a little trick that you can do. Actually, I'm going to fix my wall layer mask here, or my floor layer mask here too, because you can see this portion inside the wall. We will just add that in. So I'm going to go here and go to back to my layer 1. I'm going to use my magic wand and select this little region, zoom in, and you can see that my selection isn't quite perfect. So maybe we can get a little bit more. Nope. But what I can do is do that same trick where I'm just going to select, modify, expand by 1 pixel, like that. Then I can go to my floor tile layer mask and then go to edit and then fill and then choose white. Okay, and when I do that, it adds that portion in. So that's technically inside of the wall, but it's going to look a little bit better to fill that in with the tile material instead of just leave that being solid white. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so now we have most of everything masked out. If there's any like little things that you see need fixed, you can go around and kind of fix those. But now what we're going to do is go in and start adding in our actual textures. All right, so I'm going to go in here to my individual layers and I'm going to set my opacities all the way back up now that I'm happy with them. Okay, just like that. But for our opacities, well, for our layers like our marble here, since we want this washer and dryer to show through, what we're going to do is go up here to our blend mode and we're going to set that to multiply. Now you can see that the washer and dryer are showing through that color. And same thing here for the sink finish. Just go up here and set that to multiply. All right. All right, so next I want to go here to my tile layer. And we're going to replace this red fill with the actual pattern that we defined previously. So if I go up here to edit and then fill, I can go up here to where it says contents and choose a pattern. And where it says custom pattern, I can find my tile that I chose previously and I can click on OK. And you can see here my tile is in there like I want it. The only issue is the scale is a little bit off. So we have a few other options that we can do to fix that. One option is the pattern overlay option, which actually might be a little bit better. So let's undo that. Let's go back here to edit, fill. I'm going to fill this in with a solid white color. Okay, and then I'm going to go down here to my layer effects where it says tile, and I'm going to add in a pattern overlay. All right, so now what I can do is go in here to where it says pattern and choose my pattern, but now I can just drag my little scale slider and I can scale this till where it looks kind of reasonable. So I'm not going to be too picky on like your alignment or anything. Usually you'd want to set up your texture so that it's, aligning properly, like when you're installing it, like for the wall, but I'm not going to be too picky about that. Actually, oh, that's cool. I didn't even know you could do that. What we can do is we can go here and set the scale of it, so to get it to something that we like. So maybe something like 168, like that looks pretty reasonable for a 1 foot by 2 foot. And then you can go in here and drag it. And I just want to align the corner of it to the actual wall. So something like that. So usually when you're installing this, right, you're going to be installing the actual full tile and it's not going to be cut off. So when you set up your texture, go ahead and set the scale and then just click on this here and drag it so that one of the tiles is butting up nicely in the corner like that and you're not seeing that grout line. So something like that looks pretty good. All right, and then click on OK. And then from there, we're going to leave the floor as it is. So I'm just going to collapse this folder really quickly, and then I'm going to move on and then do the countertop. All right, so next I'll go to my counter, and then same thing, I'm going to replace my blue fill with a white fill. So edit, fill, and then white. And then I will go in here and go to my effects, and then I will choose my pattern overlay. And then for my pattern, I'm going to select my marble, and I can play around with the scale of that, get something that I like. Maybe like 80 is good. You can move it around. It doesn't really matter though, because this is a seamless texture, so anywhere you put it, it's going to look pretty much the same. So something like that's good, and then click on OK. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And then the next thing we're going to do, actually, we need to fix this so that our pattern is showing correctly. So if you go back to your pattern overlay, if you double click on the pattern overlay option and you switch the blend mode here to multiply, that's going to give us the washer and the dryer back. Okay, so make sure this is set to multiply so that we can see the washer and the dryer still. Then we can click OK. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is actually add in a stainless steel texture for our sink here so that this actually looks like it's metallic. But we're not going to do that with an actual texture. The way we're going to do that is actually by making it from scratch using techniques inside of Photoshop. So the really cool thing about Photoshop and your layer effects and your filters, as they call it, you can actually make some of your own materials just with what's built in. So I'm going to go here to my sink finish layer. All right, I'm going to collapse my counter so that I can see what's going on here a little bit easier. I'm going to click on my sink finish layer, so that's my gray layer. And I'm going to go here to where it says filter. And I want to find the one that says noise right here. And then I want to click on add noise. All right, so what this essentially does is it adds in like a pattern that looks like TV static, and you can mess with the amount there is, and you can kind of see what's going on in the background. It doesn't really matter how much you add, maybe somewhere like, I don't know, 150-ish in this range, 200. But you want to make sure, let's see. Yeah, I guess not even this matters. I'm going to click on Gaussian for distribution, but make sure you have monochromatic checked. Otherwise, it'll look like this. Just check monochromatic, and that should be fine. And then click on OK. All right, so then with that done, what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so that we can see this better. You want to keep this layer selected, and we're going to, let's see, actually, let's right click on this and go to convert to smart object. Okay, so now it's a smart object like we had in the previous lecture. Like I already talked about smart objects before, but what those let us do is apply smart filters. So smart filters are filters that can be tweaked later on after you've already applied them. In other words, if I were to blur something and it wasn't a smart blur, it would not let me go back and change that after the fact. But with the smart filter, we can change it. All right, so if I go in here to blur and I choose motion blur, all right, and then we mess with this distance slider, you can see that if I do something kind of low, it kind of looks like a brush stainless steel. So you don't want to go too low, but something here like around 50-ish pixels, that looks like a pretty decent stainless steel, right? So then once that's done, go ahead and just click on OK. And now you can see here underneath of my sync finish, I have this little smart filters option. And I can always double click on this and go back, and I can change that after the fact, which is really cool. You also have this little circle here, and if you change that, you can mess with the angle of it, so you can make it totally vertical if you wanted. I like how it looks horizontal a little bit better, so that's what I'm going to leave it as. But you can always go back and modify it. So if this was not a smart object, you wouldn't be able to do that. Once you set it, that's just what it is, and you would have to like go back and undo in order to change it. All right, so that's why we use smart filters, because we can go back and modify very easily. All right, so that looks pretty good. The only thing is it doesn't really pop, so there's not a lot of depth to the plan yet because of shadows. There's no highlights or anything like that. If I go to my example again and I zoom in here, you can see that we have a lot of nice shadowing going around around the edges and like within the sink and everything, and it just helps to create depth so that it's easier to see what's actually going on inside of the floor plan. All right, so to do that, we're going to be using layer effects. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go in here and I'm going to start from my floor and work my way up back through my layer stack. And I'm going to go back here to my floor tile layer. And then, let me see. I'm just going to try something really quick because I'm not quite sure what it's going to do. Oh, that actually does exactly what I want. Very cool. All right, so usually I would have done this a different way, but what we can do is if we click on our actual floor tile folder, we can apply an effect to the folder. And if we were to choose the inner shadow, we can add a shadow around the borders of the image, just like we want, and we can mess with the distance. Actually, let's just mess with the size. So something that is a little bit larger, I think looks better. You don't want it to be like really tight. So something that's like a little bit larger, and maybe the opacity is just a little subtle. So you don't want to overdo it and make it like really dark, but something just very subtle around the edges starts to add in some depth. Okay, so now it actually looks like the countertop is sitting up a little bit. And then we can just, play around with this, play around with all these settings, just to, have fun with it, whatever looks good. But I think something like that looks decent. And just click OK. And then once you're happy with that, go ahead and start working on the other ones. So something that we will need to do, which it's not going to work quite correctly for our sink. This is something that I'm going to have to show you. But I'm going to collapse the floor tile, and then I'm going to go up to my sink layer. Okay, and for this one, I'm going to expand this, and then I'm actually going to have to create a new layer. All right, so I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this one Sink Shadows. Oops. Sink Shadows. All right, and then I basically want to create a fill that only fills in this inner portion of the sink here. So the actual like basin of the sink, okay? So what I'm going to do is go down here to my layer 1 again. Using my magic wand, I'm going to click on just this inner portion, and then I'm going to, I just want to make sure that this selection is clean. So again, I will go up here to my select, modify, expand by 1 pixel, and then I'm going to go back to my sink shadows. I'm going to edit, fill with white. Okay. Now what I will do is click on my layer blend mode for my sink shadows. I'm going to set that to multiply. So what multiply does is it basically makes anything that's white go away. But since we still have a fill here, since that fill still exists, we can still use the layer effects like we want them. So that's kind of a little trick I use. So now what we're doing essentially is isolating our shadows to just this inside portion of the sink. So if I were to do, this is just to explain, what we're doing. If I were to go and do the same thing we did with the floor and add in a inner shadow, you can see it's just going to add the shadow in around the entire edge. So this top edge as well, and it just doesn't look as realistic. It doesn't look like this part of the sink on the inside, the actual basin, is set down within the sink. All right, so what we want to do is basically eliminate this from the shadow effect. So that's what we did here. So by creating this layer that's white, that's just the portion of the sink here, we can add the layer effect to that layer and not the actual folder. So I'll go here now to my effects, and then I will go to inner shadow. And now that you can see the shadow is actually just on this inner portion here. So now we can mess with the opacity, and we can mess with the size and stuff, and we can basically make the sink look as deep as we want it to. All right. So we're just going to play around with that, and then something here looks pretty good. And if we zoom out, you can see now that looks like it's set down a little bit, and it's slightly recessed, and it's a little bit deeper. All right. I'm just going to go in here really quick, and I'm going to clean up my my floor. So I'm going to go back to my floor tile really quick, bring back my selection, go here to select, modify, expand by 1 pixel, and then go to the layer mask, edit, fill with white. And that just cleans up any of those little white pieces that we see along the edge. All right, so I always constantly notice little things like that, and then I like to go around and just fix them as I see them, and it just makes everything look a little bit cleaner and a little bit better. All right, so next I'm going to kind of do the same thing that I did for the sink, but I'm going to do it on the toilet. All right, so I want to go here to my, let's just collapse everything we're not using. So that's the beauty of folders as well. When you're done with something, you can collapse it. It makes your layer stack a lot easier to navigate and work with. So go back here to my toilet folder, and then I'm going to click the control key and then click on my layer mask to get back my toilet. And I'm going to create a new layer, and this one's going to be toilet shadows. And then I'm going to fill this layer in, edit, fill with white right there. All right, so then if I deselect and I click control and click on that thumbnail again, just to confirm that my selection is just the toilet, that is exactly what I want. All right, so now I'm gonna do is, actually, you know what? We didn't even need to do that for this one. We could actually just apply the effect to the folder itself. I keep forgetting that you can do that. So you really don't even need to create this toilet shadows layer. We can really just go in here to the actual toilet folder and then just click on the inner shadow and just do it that way and just apply just a very slight inner shadow right here. All right, so something really small. Doesn't need to be crazy. All right. So then something like that looks pretty good for our floor plan. And then again, if you want to change anything, like maybe if these walls are blending in with the floor a little bit too much, you could go in and go to your walls and then change the opacity of that wall fill to something just a little bit darker so that it stands out a little bit better. So maybe something like around 90 looks a little bit better. And then from there, pretty much you're done with the rendering of the floor plan. All right, so then you would want to go ahead and save this for next week, and then next week we're going to go ahead and actually take this in to InDesign. But go ahead for right now and just save this one, and then really quickly I'm just going to get you started on the elevation so that you have an idea of what to do for that, because it's a little bit more involved. Okay, so elevation, we open it up here, and again, we have no background and the lines are very light. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new background. I'm going to drag that folder into the original so we can see that the original is layer 1 and the lines go away when I turn that on and off. But layer 2, this is going to be my white background. All right, and then I'm going to go here to edit and then fill, and I'm going to fill this with white. Okay, and now we can see our lines really clearly. Actually, what I'm going to do here also is use my crop tool, and I'm going to go down here to the corner where I'm cropping this and start pulling it out this way a little bit. But as I do that, I'm going to hit the Shift key and the Alt key. So Shift is going to crop this uniformly, and Alt is going to crop it from the center. I just want to do this a little bit outward, so I'm getting more space on my canvas to work with. So I'm going to crop it out here somewhere and release, and then I'm going to zoom out, and that looks pretty good. And then when I'm happy with it, I'm just going to click on my check mark up here or click on the Enter key, and that's going to expand my crop. Then I'm just going to fill this white background layer in again to get that all the way out. So now I can kind of see what's going on a little bit better. Okay, so same thing. You want to approach this the same way. You want to go around and you want to isolate different parts of the image, different materials, so that you can make it look as you want. So for example, I know my soffit here and my wall here, these are going to both be just painted. So I can create a new folder for wall paint. Make sure that your folders are set above the line work. So I'm going to call this my wall paint folder. And then within my wall paint folder, I will create my new layer, and that's going to be paint. All right, and then we can go around and making sure that we're on our layer 1. So you could even just rename this line work so you don't get confused. Making sure on your line work layer, go around with your magic wand and select the regions that you want. So I want this region for the soffit, and then I want this region right here. And then we can click the wall paint folder and then click on our layer mask button, and that's going to create our layer mask. Then I can just add in a simple fill. Like that, and I can see that my wall is filled how I want it to be. Okay, so let's do, let me see here. It's pretty straightforward. It's a lot similar to the floor plan, but there's a few things, like I said, that are different. So I'm going to show you how we can do the, let's see, let's do this backsplash here. So I'm going to collapse this and then create another new folder, and this one's going to be my backsplash. All right, so then I will go in here with my magic wand, and I want to Make sure I'm on my line work again. But I want to go in here, and this one's a little bit time consuming because we're actually going to click on each of these individually. All right, but it'll be worth it because you can do a pretty cool effect with it if you do each of them individually like this. So I'm going to go around here, click on all my little wall tiles that I have. All right, then once we have all of these selected, making sure we didn't miss any, let's go ahead and I'm actually going to not apply a layer mask to this one. I'm going to just create a new folder and then fill this in with white. So let's go to edit and then fill, and then go here to, let's go here to color, and then I'm going to take this all the way to the left and then drag up slightly, and I want something that's just a little bit off white, so just slightly a little bit toward the gray, but still just sort of a whitish color, and then click OK, and click OK again to fill that in. So now we have a slight off-white color. I'm going to click Control D to minimize to get rid of my selection. I'm going to switch my layer name. This is going to be my wall tile layer. I'm going to switch my blend mode of the layer to multiply so that I'm not hiding any of the line work here. But now what is actually going to make this look like tile is another layer effect. So if I make sure my layer is selected, go down here to my effects, I want to choose bevel and emboss. And what this does is it basically adds a shadow to one side of the tile and a highlight to one side. But if you mess around with this, you can basically get something that looks pretty three-dimensional and convincing, and you can even like expand this and make it bigger. You don't want to do anything too big or else it'll look weird, but just you can mess with the softening to make the shadow not quite so harsh. But we just want to play around with this to get something that looks kind of convincing. There's even different styles you can mess around with, so inner, outer, either pillow emboss, I would say, or the emboss, or this inner bevel works pretty well. The technique here, smooth or the chisel options, will kind of, again, change that a little bit, how the edge is looking. But I like to just kind of keep it something soft and subtle. But you can just play around with this and kind of get something you like. But that is the good thing about selecting each of these tiles individually, because if you selected them all together, you wouldn't be able to do this and actually make them look like real tiles. Okay, and then if you were to go in here, like you can't see the highlight very well. You could actually edit this, I believe, and make that highlight a little bit more pronounced if you were to play around with its blend mode and stuff. So you can experiment with that. Let's see, that was on screen. You can play around with the angle that the light is shining, but you're going to want to keep it somewhere around like just 90, I would think. I'm actually just going to cancel this to bring it back how it was. If you do want to mess around with the color, then you could go back here to just the wall tile layer, and you could go to edit, fill, and change the fill color. So if I were to change it to just any color, whoops, making sure it's still selected, you have to make sure you preserve your selection by clicking Control and then clicking on the thumbnail. Edit, fill, if I make this slightly darker, you'll be able to see the highlight just a little bit better. All right, but essentially that's what we're doing for the tiles, something like that. Okay, So like I said, you don't want to overdo it because then you get these weird little shadows around sort of the edges of some of your other things, which kind of looks a little bit odd. But just play around with it and get something that's really kind of subtle, okay? All right, so once you have that how you like, you would go in and kind of do the same thing for all the other objects that are inside of the elevation. Let me go back to my example here really quickly. All right, so I have, just like the sink in the floor plan, you can see I have added in the same sort of pattern here to the washer and dryer. All right, then we just have some color fills going on. Here for the cabinet doors, I basically just added in these shadows to the actual recesses. So sort of just exactly like I did with the sink, if you go in with your magic wand and you create just solid white blocks here, so you do a magic wand here, here, and here, and then here, here, and here for your cabinet doors. So let's see, if I were to go in here and then I were to make a cabinets folder, all right, we could go in here again with the magic wand and then click on all of these little recesses. And also, it's even good to do this portion here on both of them. So I'm going to click on this and then click on all my recesses. And then I'm going to go to my folder, add in a new layer. And then I'm going to edit, fill with white or off-white, something like that. And then add in my layer effect. So inner shadow. Something subtle again. And then you can see I'm already starting to get the depth of where it looks like those panels are sticking out. Something else you'll want to do, so you can see as I do this, it's actually interfering with the lines that are running through this, so the actual swing lines. So you could go in here with a rectangular marquee and you could create a selection around them and just include them. So if you were to go into all these, I'm just going to do it for these upper ones and just get something. It doesn't have to be perfect, but something that kind of does this. And then if you go in here and then click on edit, fill, and then add white in there as well, it's going to eliminate those and then just set this to multiply there. So now you're not actually getting shadows cast from these lines, which is essentially what it was doing. So that's why it read a little bit muddy, because it was casting shadows from them. But you could just do that to sort of eliminate that. But then you can just play around with your shadow and make it, a little bit darker. And now you can see that we're getting really good depth, and that looks a lot more three-dimensional. Okay, so very quickly, we don't have to do a lot of work, but we're already starting to get that depth that we're seeing. Now let's go ahead here on our paint color that I have. So I'm going to go in here to my wall paint, and I'm going to give that a little bit more of a reasonable color. So if I go to fill and change the color to something, I don't know, just a little bit more less intense. What I can do now is apply a filter to this to actually give it some texture. So texture is another thing that helps things look a little bit more realistic whenever you're doing these renderings. So if we go back here to my example, you can see I actually have this texture that's running through here that actually makes this look a little bit more like drywall. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So to do that, what you would do is go here on your like paint layer, and you could convert this to a smart object if you wanted to. I'll just leave it as it is for this example, but if you go here to filter and then I believe filter gallery is what I did. Yes. So if you go to filter gallery, what I did was I went down here to this folder that says texture and then texturizer, and then you just play around with this scaling and relief. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a preview of what it looks like, and I think you can even zoom out to see what it'll look like on the entire wall, but sometimes it doesn't give you the best preview. But just play around with it, and maybe you don't want it to be like too intense, but let's just see what this does. The texture I use is sandstone from this drop down here. So there's different ones that'll make it look like differently. This one looks like a paint canvas, I think. All right, but I like the sandstone to match like just like a sort of drywall texture. Click OK. And then that was a pretty small scale. So let's do that one more time. Filter gallery. Turn up the scale a little bit more. Click OK. And that looks just a little bit better. So now you can see that there's a little bit of a difference in the material between the wall and the cabinets. And then something else that I did, since the soffit actually sticks out past the wall, I like to make this portion of the wall look a little bit recessed. So something you can do is create a new layer here called, I'm just going to call this wall shadow. All right, and I'm going to use my rectangular marquee, and we don't have to be super precise because of our layer mask, but if I were to go in here, I just want to make sure that the top portion of the selection lines up with the bottom of my soffit. Okay, and then once we do that, if we go to our gradient tool, which is under our paint bucket section, so go to gradient, make sure that your gradient is set to, if you click on the basics here, you want it to be set to this middle option where it looks like the transparent background and the solid black. Click on that. And then you want your foreground color to be black and your background color to be white. And then if you go over this and you set the layer blend mode to multiply, all right, so wall shadow layer, multiply is my blend mode. I just want to create a gradient starting somewhere up here and then drag it straight down using the shift key. So shift's going to limit me. Drag it straight down and then release. And you'll see that it adds in just this sort of shadow right there underneath of the wall. So that's a little bit intense. If it's too intense, you can click on Control Z and undo that. And then maybe start your gradient somewhere up here and drag it down a little bit so that looks better. The closer you start your gradient to your actual selection, the darker it'll be. Okay, so, and also the longer you do this gradient line, the longer the gradient will be, like the longer the fall off of the darkness to light. So if you do something really short, it's a very short transition. Something very long is a very long transition. All right, but you just want something very small. So maybe start outward, but then only drag a little bit into your selection. That's going to give you something very subtle, and you could even build it up too. You can do it multiple times and make it slightly darker and darker. But something like that is what I like to do. So then you can see that obviously the soffit here is set out in front of this portion of the wall, so it looks a little bit recessed too. And you could even add it as well to the side here because the cabinets are sticking out further than the wall too. So you could even go in here and create one more little selection here staying on your wall shadow, and then just do another small gradient this way. Something very small. So then it looks like that's just set back and it's like a little alcove in there. All right. The gradient is also the tool that I used for the washer and dryer here. So you can see I made the top portion of the washer and dryer and also the bottom portion. They have a slight gradient. So that way the middle of it gets a little bit of a highlight. All right. So that's how I did that. And then I also used the gradient for my window glass effect too. So let me show you that really quick. If I were to go in here and I'm going to use my magic wand, go back to my line work layer, create a selection on my window, and then I want to make sure that I get this pattern in there as well. You can see if I zoom in, my marching ants are going around the actual hatch that I have, but I can use my rectangular marquee and add those in. So now it's just the glass itself. And then if I create, let's see, I'm going to create a new folder for my window. Okay, we'll add a layer to it. We're going to call that glass. And then I'm going to, on my window, actually give that the layer mask. So now you can see that the layer mask is isolated to just the glass there. Now on my glass layer, what I want to do is choose a color. Actually, let's see here. You can actually play around with the gradients itself. So if I were to go in here to my basic gradients, and then maybe choose this first option here, you can play around with these. And if you want to select a color, change your foreground color from black to like a bluish color. Okay, so something that the glass would be, and then leave white as your background. You can come in here and you can start drawing the gradient in at an angle. Also make sure that you have your layer set to multiply so that you can get your hatch in there too. But if you start adding in like that, you'll start to get what you're looking for. There is a way to modify this. Actually, I think if I, there we go. So if you click on that, you'll get this gradient editor, and you can drag these points around in order to change how your gradient is showing. So let me see if I can get that how I want it. Okay, so then you can add blue into this side basically. So then what you're looking at is white in the middle and blue on the edges. Okay, and then if you were to do the gradient again, you can see now I get that blue strip kind of falling in the middle, and I can just keep doing this till I get it how I want it. So something like that is decent. I think there is a default one built in, so you don't have to do that like I did from scratch. You'll just have to look at what is within your options here, but you can basically build these gradients and set them to look however you want. And to get to that edit menu, all I did was double click on that option there. And then you pull around these sliders, and you can click here to add in a new sort of color. So just click at the bottom, and then you'll get a new little slider. And if you double click on the slider, you can add a new color in. All right, so for example, you can make it red, and then I could do it again and get like a red, white, and blue effect. But that's all I did for that. So same thing for here for the glass there. It's pretty straightforward. So making sure I didn't miss anything, but just go in and you can, I'm going to give you this example too, so you can go in and see what I did, but you can see all the like texture I added. It's the exact same method I did for the wall. Added in my countertop pattern. These are just solid color fills here. So all the controls and stuff like that are just solid color fills. That's pretty straightforward. So you just want to make sure you go in here and look at what I did and duplicate it as well as you can. And it should be pretty straightforward, I think. One more thing. This is another little trick you can do. So usually in elevations, you don't show like flooring materials or stuff, but sometimes like for an elevation like this where it's for a presentation, it's kind of good to show that just to give a little bit more of an explanation of, you know, what other materials are in the space. So what I did here is I actually added in my texture in perspective, you know, coming out from my wall, just so that it just adds a little bit more information and detail to the actual image, okay? So to reiterate, if you want to do that, you could, an easy way is just to go to your actual texture and then drag and drop it onto your elevation. All right, I'm going to drag that up to the top. And then we're going to scale, and do that. I'm going to scale this up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to align it to the bottom edge of my wall. And I'm going to drag this so that it aligns to that portion too, and then drag it back down so that we're nice and lined up. And then what you can do is, let me crop this to be a little bit bigger so I can see more of my canvas. Oops. Okay. All right, so from there you can just take these corners, just click Control and use your Move tool, hover over them and then just drag them outward like that. And then drag this up. Hold Shift and drag it up so you can kind of distort that a little bit. And you just want something like that. So there, now you have the floor sort of coming out at you in perspective. And then one last little trick that I like to do is add in a stroke around everything. So a stroke basically is a thickened line that kind of helps things read a little bit better. So it's a way to just add a little bit more depth to what you're doing. All right, so what I like to do here is I'm actually going to, here, let me just show you. I'm going to go to my top layer when I have everything set how I want it. I'm going to click Control, Shift, Alt, and E at the same time. Control, Shift, Alt, E. That's going to make a flattened version of all the layers together. So if I were to go in here and turn off all my layers, you can see that nothing really goes away. And that's because I have this layer on top, and basically this is everything just merged into one layer. All right, so once I've done that, I'm going to click on the white portion outside here. Give it a second. And then when it gets like this, I'm just going to delete that. So now basically I'm left with just the image itself right here. All right. So now with that selected, I'm going to hold Control and click on it, and I'm going to fill that in with white, edit, fill, and then white. All right, so now I have white, and it's basically over top of exactly where my elevation is, okay? Once I have that, I'm going to switch the blend mode to multiply. Okay? And then I'm going to turn on all my other layers again. Just like that. So now I have my white layer sitting on top of them, but I can't see the white layer itself. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to rename this to be my, I don't know, boundary stroke or something. Okay. And then we can go in here to our effects, and we can go to stroke. And then when I do that, you can kind of see what's happening. So it basically creates an outline. All right, so I have an outline that goes around where that white was, and you just want to turn this up a little bit so that you get a little bit of it standing out away from the rest of your line work. So then you can even change the opacity and stuff. Maybe it's not so dark. Something a little bit subtle, not too crazy. Just like that to set it off of the white background. Click OK. And there, that looks a little bit better. Now, this is a trick that you can use anywhere throughout here. So if something wasn't reading quite with the right depth, you could go in, for example, and if I wanted to maybe create a stroke for this right here, I could go in, and whenever you do your color fill, so if I were to show you on my example, if I were to fill this in with my gray color, like that, now you can go in here on this fill itself and then just give it the layer effect for a stroke. And you can play with that and, you know, give it as much depth as you want, okay? And another thing about the layer effects is you can stack as many as you want on a layer. So if you wanted to add in then like an inner shadow or a bevel and emboss, you could then go in and add that as well. All right, so you can just play around with it and get as creative as you want. And you can even reorder these so that the bevel and emboss is underneath of the stroke, I believe, but you know, it just depends. You can do a lot of crazy stuff with it. So you can kind of go in on this elevation and use the layer effects, play around with all of these and see what they do. So there's a lot in here that I didn't go over. There's all kinds of layer effects. I encourage you to mess around with them and just see what they all do, see how they work, and see how they can make the picture look better. And I think that's a pretty good start. So what I want you to do this week is follow along with this video, do all the steps that I did, and then I want you to actually go in and complete all of this, complete the rest of the elevation, make it look as similar to mine as you can in terms of the level of detail I went into. You know, try to get as many of these effects in as you can. Just make it look good, make it pop off the page and look nice. And then once you're done with that, save your files for next week. And next week I'm going to pick back up and I'm going to show you with our finished files how we go about exporting them to bring into InDesign. And then next week we'll actually be laying them out in InDesign. But for this week, just do the renderings within Photoshop of the floor plan and the elevation. And then next week, I'm going to pick up and show you how we take this over to InDesign and then do that. And then we're going to wrap up this assignment. So not quite as long as the first practical assignment, but hopefully that means that you'll have more time to make these look really good. All right.